still have to close this chapter on the Isabella story.
Mm-hmm.
We have we want more dynamic things happening in the world.
Let me ask you guys, for those of you that play New World, but if you play New World, do you know who Isabella even is? The bad girl. Yeah. She's the bad girl that you fight in Dynasty Shipyard who runs away after she's like six the dogs on you. That's it. Yeah, the crazy flying pirate girl. Exactly. Sylvanas. So you don't even really know who that is. You've got to tell the story in a better way. It's not that the story is bad. I don't think that the fundamental of the story, that coming to America, there's this corrupting force that has been corrupting people for thousands of years, and you have all the different races that have been, or cultures, whatever you want to call them, that have been corrupted by this over the years. The idea of the story is really good. You have the recipe for a good story. It's just they're using the wrong ingredients. They're not iconic because people don't know who they are. The thing is, they are iconic in the scope of the game, but they're not iconic because nobody really knows who they are. Most people recognize Thorpe? No, they recognize the New World guy. They don't recognize Thorpe. They recognize the New World guy. Okay? Let's keep that in mind.
Hey there, YouTube. Hot Soup here. Thanks for clicking on the video. New World's March patch, the Heart of Madness, is almost upon us. This patch is bringing a bunch of nice quality of life improvements, a new short-range weapon called the Blunderbuss, and last but certainly not least, additions to the main story quests and a brand new dungeon, or they like to call it expedition, called the Tempest Heart, which focuses on the game's antagonist, Isabella. It promises to dive deeper into her backstory and set up future narratives that we can expect in the game going forward. Most excitedly, the devs have promised a cutscene of some kind after the completion of the dungeon, and that's something we haven't had at all in this AAA game from one of the wealthiest companies in the world. It kind of blows my mind, honestly. Well, I felt the need to catch up on the game's lore in preparation for this new expedition and thought you all might benefit from what I found. So we're going to go over Isabella's backstory and recap our level 1 through 60 journey, so we're ready to enjoy this cutscene as soon as we face roll the dungeon. I mean, the gear score is 580, let's be serious, but let's get into it. Hansu. Quick heads up, I am going to be covering events in the current level 1 through 60 MSQ and lore pages that you can discover. These are definitely spoilers if you haven't experienced it yourself. I am going to avoid spoiling anything from the new dungeon and some of the data mined lore pages and quests from the upcoming patch, however. So hopefully this is fair warning for anyone who cares about that stuff. Here's a quick and dirty timeline I made covering the Msq Leveling Experience from 1 to 60. I'm going to cover the broad strokes of what I feel are the big beats in the story. I'll link some resources in the description if you want to dive in a bit deeper into any of this. But be aware, not every story or plot element is going to be represented here, but I will try and call out some notable NPCs or side quests that may be relevant. However, Isabella's story actually begins at an unspecified number of years before the events that occur at the start of the game. So let's scroll up a bit and start there. Our girl Isabella Deleon wasn't always the fiery face of corruption that she is today. She was once a member of the Spanish nobility, her family owning a well-renowned seafaring merchant trading company. Unfortunately, things take a drastic turn when her two older brothers are deemed lost at sea and her parents pass away shortly after. This left Isabella the sole heir to the family business, but tragedy strikes again as she finds out that her father had mismanaged the company funds, leaving it in heavy debt, with Isabella facing financial ruin. All of this leaves Isabella struggling to come to terms with her own morality and is desperate to find a way to extend her youth. These thoughts provoke Isabella to seek out a rumor she's heard of someone being held by the church, spouting heretical details about other gods and the secret to immortality. She uses her connections in the royal court to meet with this character that the game refers to as the heretic in these lore pages. Now, the heretic is guessed to be an ex-priest, and evidence of his immortality lie in claims that the church has actually tried to kill him for heresy, but have been unable to do so. The heretic is in possession of a blue substance with healing properties he calls Azoth, and is able to convince Isabella that more can be obtained from the mythical Fountain of Youth, which he claims is very much real and is located on a little-known island somewhere in the Atlantic called Vitae Aeternum, which in Latin translates to life eternal. With renewed purpose, Isabella strikes a deal with her largest debtor, a company called the Red Sign. Now, I only mentioned the Red Sign because there seems to be some ominous foreshadowing with this company. They already know of Azoth and Aeternum, and they've actually tried to interrogate the heretic for the location of the island. But now that the heretic is only speaking to Isabella, they actually commission her to captain an expedition of 3 ships and crew to seek out the location of this island, Vitae Aeternum. Her one notable condition is to have the heretic freed from the church, but put in chains and held in her ship to go along on the trip. Bad idea, Isabella. Over the course of the next few weeks and months at sea, Isabella falls ill while spending more time in her cabin conversing day and night with the heretic. The ships do not have an easy time. They make little progress with an unusual lack of winds to push them forward, and they run into several major storms. The crew thinks they're actually sailing in circles. Eventually, they hit the Storm of Storms. Isabella's ship crashes into a rocky outcropping, and the other 2 ships are deemed lost. She and her crew find themselves on a deserted beach, which they learn from the heretic is in fact Aeternum. Now, Isabella is driven to find the Fountain of Youth, so she forces the surviving crew to march north, ignoring the fates of the other ships in her expedition. And this is where we see Isabella's descent into madness. The crew experiences some supernatural events, and they come to learn the truth about immortality on the island. And Isabella goes to such lengths to test this by attempting to execute a number of her crew members for a potential mutiny, and she kills them and then watches them come back to life, confirming the immortality that's available on the island, which drives her even more to search for the source of the Fountain of Youth. By chance, Isabella and her crew reunite with some survivors from the other lost ships, but Isabella's paranoia leads her to actually attack them, and it's an all-out war as crews from the different ships slay each other, resurrect back to life, then simply continue the conflict. This goes on for months. Eventually, Isabella's camp is overwhelmed, but it's found out that Isabella herself has fled with the heretic in tow. The last entry from Isabella's point of view has her reaching the base of a tall mountain littered with bones, and the heretic actually commands her to build a church to find the truth. Even though exhausted, Isabella picks up a stone and starts building. The heretic then says this quote, "When the last stone is in place, the way to the fountain will be granted. You will feel all Eternum course through you. You will live forever in this place, Isabella." Pretty ominous. So this is the last passage, as I had mentioned, before we see any references of her commanding the corrupted forces and being referred to as the Tempest. What the significance of that title is, what Isabella's motivations are, or how the other corrupted became corrupted, isn't really explained or explored too much in the lore. So don't blame yourself if you don't know. The game hasn't revealed that to us just yet. All right, so let's head back to the start of this video game. We are introduced to 2 characters in this pretty sick intro. We have Mr. New World himself, Captain Thorpe, and this guy who a lot of people had assumed was the heretic that was mentioned, but I don't think so. He has a flashback to when he was on a ship and they sunk. He got red eyes from that. I don't think this is the heretic. I think this is another character that may be related to Isabella. I don't think it's been really explained who this person is. But at any rate, he meets up with Captain Thorpe in this bar. He gives him this box, and we, at this point, don't know the contents of this, but it does prompt Thorpe to take a ship to Aeternum. Our player character is actually a crew member on the ship. It's not really explained what our position is. We actually have quarters within the ship, which is super rare at the time. So most likely we were an officer of some kind reporting to Thorpe. But again, it's not really clarified. And even in the course of the main story quests, it's not really mentioned again. We set sail for Eternum, and we hit a storm of storms as well. And our ship crashes on the rocks, and our player character wakes up on the beach. After a short tutorial, we crest a hill and we're given a really beautiful view of the island of Eternum with a shattered mountain in the background. It's really one of the best intros I've ever experienced in an MMO. It really got me hyped. You then go down a path and you actually meet up with Captain Thorpe, which is super surprising. He's looking a lot more evil and corrupted, and he accuses you of stealing the box that he had come over with. And so you have a epic fight with him. He shoots a beam into your chest, and surprisingly, that causes everything to explode unexpectedly, and you wake up on the beach again. After some introduction and tutorial quests in the nearby town, also you get to choose your faction. Around level 20, you're sent to meet a lone fisherman who you find out is named Jonas. I don't know what's up with Jonas's face for real. I thought this guy was going to turn out to be a villain at some point. I don't know why they chose to make him look like that when nobody ages on this island, but whatever. Jonas sends us out on such critical missions like looting chests, killing bad dudes, then looting more chests and killing bad dudes. And over the course of this, it's revealed that Jonas is actually one of the last Soul Wardens. So Jonas reveals that the Soul Wardens are a group of folks sworn to stop the corruption on the island. They're all immortal and have some innate resistance to the corruption itself. And he convinces you to join this order. And in doing so, he has you forge an Azoth staff, which allows you to close the corruption portals around Eternum. And after some prodding, actually, he decides to reestablish the Soul Warden HQ in the Brightwood territory. Quick side note here, around this time, you meet an important NPC named Adiana Theron. Adiana seems to have been on the island for a very long time. She's the first one to warn you about the commander of the corruption forces, the Tempest, who we know as Isabella. She also seems to be an actual angry Earth that's somehow cool with humans, especially with her redesign that they made after the game launch. They gave her tree horns or something. She was way more human at the launch of the game, so don't be surprised that you don't recognize who this character is if you played that early on. I'm not entirely sure of her backstory. Also, she's a killer on the squat machine. She plays a pretty critical role at the tail end of the MSQ, so it's good to know who she is right now. Back to our friend Jonas. Fort Alazar is established in the north end of Brightwood. Jonas fears without the help of the faction leaders, there's no way to overcome the corruption threat. So our character actually volunteers to speak to the factions. Jonas is somewhat skeptical that you can actually do it, but he sends you off to meet with the faction leaders and convince them of the great corruption threat from the north. Many chests and bad dudes killed later. By the way, I'm going to gloss over boar anal glands, stone bear poop, just a lot of wacky fetch quests. You actually manage to unite the factions. So each one sends a representative to Fort Alazar. So you're pretty much ready to take on the Tempest, and somehow you're informed by one of the faction leaders that the Tempest is actually calling for you to go meet them in a dungeon called the Depths. The weird thing is, whoever is claiming to be the Tempest in the Depths is sending threats out, asking to bring the box. So this is the first time you're hearing again about this box since you spoke to Thorpe at the beginning of the game. Well, you don't have the box, but you end up going anyway. You discover your old nemesis, Captain Thorpe, is there to kill you, and he's calling himself the Tempest for some reason. I gotta tell you, things get really wacky here in the storyline. You seemingly kill Thorpe in that dungeon and are given a clue to the whereabouts of the mysterious box he brought to the island in the hands of the angry Earth. Why he called himself the Tempest, seemingly to contradict what Isabella's title is, or what even the Tempest is, still isn't explained in the game. You head back to Fort Alazar, and unfortunately you find it on fire. And there's no sign of Jonas. You follow some blood spatters and some clues of corruption, and you go into a cave and you find that Jonas has been corrupted. And he actually reveals to you that all soul wardens eventually do get corrupted, and he's kind of sad about it. He turns totally corrupted like a mindless monster, and you end up having to kill him, your buddy Jonas. It's a pretty sad moment of the story. With Fort Alazar gone, you now have a want to go and kill Isabella. You have a clue that the box that she's searching for is with the Angry Earth, so you head to Eden Grove to talk to Adiana Theron. Adiana Theron tells you that in order to get the box from the Angry Earth, you have to get on their good graces. So she gives you a number of chests to go look for, bad dudes to kill, and you come back and you are then sent into the Mother Well to cleanse it of the corruption by putting blight into it, another thing that's poisonous to you, but is also poisonous to the corruption. So you end up doing that. Adiana then tells you that Isabella is working with the Empress and that you should go and try and stop her before they get a bunch of ships with the corruption mobs on it off of the island to attack the Empress's old empire. Very brief backstory on the Empress here. She was the heir to the dynasty in China. Her brother actually usurps her and tells her to leave. So she takes a bunch of her soldiers and servants and leaves and comes to Eternum. But she's always harbored this revenge to get back at her brother and get their dynasty back. And Isabella uses that to negotiate terms where the Empress will use corruption and help Isabella also get corruption forces off of the island using the ships and resources that the Empress has. These events lead you to the Dynasty Shipyard dungeon, where you actually have an encounter with Isabella, she being the second boss in the dungeon. You fight her to 50% health, and she summons some lions to attack you, and then she disappears. So you don't know where she went. You end up fighting the Empress at the end of the dungeon and seemingly killing her and stopping the chance of the corruption leaving the island with her ships. You head back to Adiana Theron to inform her of this, and unfortunately you find that Isabella actually went and attacked the Angry Earth and attained the box, the mysterious box. All of this happened off screen, which is kind of a bummer. She has taken the box to the Shattered Mountain, to the north to Shattered Mountain, so you head over there to search for Isabella, and that's where the main story quest really just suddenly stops. You're doing some fetch quests for a talking bear, a talking wolf, but other than that, there's really not much going on at the end there. It just suddenly stops. So that's about it. That took much longer than I thought it would. I apologize. But now you're ready to take on the Heart of Madness expedition when it launches in March. Presumably, we'll be going into the church that Isabella has built in Shattered Mountain and face against her with her full power now given to her. And we'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm really looking forward to it. It's supposedly a hard dungeon, but it is a 580 gear score capped dungeon. So I feel like if you have 600 gear score or higher gear, it should be a cakewalk. But I'll see you guys there. If you liked this video, please hit that like button. If you want to hear more about New World as I post them, hit the subscribe button. It tells me if I'm on the right track. So thank you very much. I'll see you around Eternum.